Chapter 21. A Man and His Dog. A young ranger named Farley, taking supplies to his cabin in the mountains, caught sight of an animal that resembled a wolf trotting up a ravine. In thinking about it later, he recalled that it lacked the wolf's bushy tail and the usual upright ears. Also, in spite of the noise of his horse's iron shoes, made in clinking against stones in the trail, it did not take alarm and bolt for cover. Instead, it had seemed entirely oblivious of him, and everything else, for it had looked neither to the right nor the left, and had followed its course almost mechanically. He pondered the incident, and decided that it might be some Indian's dog, if not an odd-colored wolf, and soon he let the matter pass from his mind. He was the first and only man who saw Reddy during his year in the mountains, and he saw him in the transition stage soon after he left the Porcupine, when he was drifting about aimlessly, no longer having a particular interest in the wilds, yet holding back from giving way to the natural instincts of a dog. The indomitable spirit of the black wolf was still a part of him. Lonely and sick at heart, he wandered around the mighty domain of the king, visited all the old familiar places, in a listless yet restless way which left him unsatisfied. When he hunted, he never felt like raising his voice, and when the hated coyotes came sneaking around as soon as he had turned his back on the remains of a kill, he often lacked the will to drive them off. The timber wolves gave him little attention now, for they were taking care of cubs that were scattered in pairs all around the mountains, watching over their dens and enjoying the easy hunting that came with spring. He met them occasionally, old wolves whom he had seen again and again. They were friendly, but seemed always in a hurry and anxious to go about their business. It was almost as if he were an outcast, with no friend, no place in the busy life of the vast wilderness. For many days he drifted this way, sleeping alone in remote areas, in thickets when tired, and waking to roam further, although always avoiding the valley of the Porcupine. And then all at once, in the middle of a calm, moonlit night, a different feeling surged over him. It was as if he suddenly wakened up, and could not understand why he'd been wandering aimlessly so long and so alone. The coyotes were yapping on that night, horned owls were calling, but they stopped when they heard what they thought was a wolf howling. It began with Reddy standing on a high rock, looking across the valley to the far peaks, and giving that lonely call again and again, until the whole world seemed to echo with it, and the air seemed to vibrate. A tingling sensation ran up and down his spine and through his brain, clearing away the numbness, and leaving him strangely free from his former doubts and misery. With a quick surge of emotion, he gave the old-time roar, and sprang down from the rock. In full cry, his soul released, he began to run. Not in any helter-skelter manner, as on the trail of a beast of the forest, but purposely toward a goal. Presently he ceased to bay, though continuing on his way, as straight as the mountains would permit, with scarcely ever a stop for a river or precipice or ford. Johnny was marking off a Saturday, May 18th, on the calendar nailed to the wall of the bungalow's main room, while Mac sat at ease near the stove digesting a good dinner and blowing out clouds of pipe smoke while he watched him. "It's been a good winter," said Mac, as if the silence oppressed him, "and I never saw a more decent spring." "Yes," answered Johnny after a pause, "we can't complain." "And yet," said his friend, "you're talking of leaving the valley. When do you plan to go? Right now, when there isn't as much work on hand?" "No, I'm not going for a while. You know I'm not." Mac shook his scraggy head and tamped down the ashes in his pipe with a gnarled thumb. "Yes, I know. You think about going away. And you're as restless as a cat, but you won't leave that wolf dog." "Why, hang it, man, he left you." "Oh well, I'm with you on it, I guess. He wasn't just a dog. You sort of got me going, too." After a pause, he cleared his throat and asked the all-important question that was on his mind. "You sort of have any ideas about getting married back there in Wyoming?" It was asked so bluntly, although hesitatingly, that Johnny had to laugh. "Mac," he said, "let's face one thing at a time. The truth is, I don't want to go back to Wyoming without Reddy. I couldn't leave while there's a chance of his coming back. Every day that chance grows less, but there's still reason to hope. Perhaps you wouldn't understand it, but I'd miss him and not feel happy if I left now. And the people down there would feel the same way if I came alone. His life and mine are sort of woven into each other." A twinkle lighted up Mac's eyes. "You don't mean to say that he helps you with your courting?" And he laughed delightedly. Johnny ignored the question, but frowned. "Mac, if all I've heard about the king is true, he's somewhere around 14 years old. You know what that means in the mountains. He's getting gray and tired, and his teeth are wearing down. He'll be forced to rely on younger wolves to lead and hunt and fight against the world, while he just trails along for whatever they feel like leaving to him. Don't you see what that will do to a high-strung old leader like him? He won't be able to stand it long. He won't bear being pushed around. Perhaps Reddy's his only companion, and if that's true, I'm sure the great old fellow is being well treated. But if the two are running around with wolves, there will be fighting all the time, with Reddy taking the king's part against the bullying of the others. Something is bound to happen. I expected it in March, when the hunting is always so hard. Now I don't know quite what to think. Reddy may not have found him, or something may have happened to Reddy, or to both of them. There's been no sign of them in the valley all these months, and no one's reported seeing them anywhere. I've thought of taking a trip and trying to locate Reddy, but I'm afraid that in my absence he might turn up here, find me gone, and never come back again. What would you do?" Mac was fussing with his old pipe and wondering how to put it into words, what had been on his mind for some time. He was not much of a sentimental nature, but something about his friend's attachment for the hound and the strange link between these two and the black wolf had seemed to spell tragedy from the beginning, and had stirred his sympathy deeply. He cleared his throat. As if not satisfied with the start, he cleared it again. "If I give you good advice, will you follow it?" he asked. Johnny hesitated a few moments, and then nodded his head. "Yes, I'll follow it." "Then," Mac said quickly, "go back to Wyoming at once. Give up this job. You'll never enjoy it again. Things have happened to you that you just can't shake from your thoughts. The mountains haven't changed, but you have. And back of it all is the king. If he hadn't found Reddy as a pup on the trail that night, you would just be a ranger. But he raised Reddy, and Reddy started you on a new life. You'll never be a real ranger again. You did more than anyone else would have done for a dog when you brought him back here. But he was changed too. I can't see how he could be a wolf again, even if he found the king. And the chances are that he didn't find him. And so what could a dog do alone in these mountains in the winter? If he were alive, you'd know it somehow. He's gone. And if you have any sense, you'll leave now, not mope around the valley any longer. The wolf has done his part. Reddy has done his. Now you'll have to get along without them in the new life that's open to you, because of them." Mac had never talked as long as this. He leaned back and smoked while Johnny sat quiet, still thinking. "It'll be getting dark soon, old hoss. I'm leaving for the castle," Mac said at length. "Mac," Johnny's voice was very low, "tomorrow stop the southbound train for me, will you?" Mac stood looking at him, and then quickly turned away. "I'll stop it," he answered throatily, and then turned to the door. Presently, the slow, rhythmic click of his horse's hooves could be heard on the stony trail. Johnny thought of his own horses and walked outside to have a look at them, and make sure that they had sufficient feed for the night. They had been grazing in the valley most of the day and had come to the corral in late afternoon. Then he prepared his own supper of canned vegetable soup, flapjacks, ham, and preserves. He was in such a thoughtful mood that he did not remember to make coffee. After washing and drying the dishes, he sat near the stove, reviewing in his mind the long years that he had lived in this valley. Lonely years, all of them, but none so lonely as this one. Mac was right, he thought. Poor Reddy. Sitting there in the overheated room, with only a little lamp burning, he fell asleep and dreamed. He was in Wyoming riding on the ranch, with Reddy trotting beside the horse, ready to obey his slightest command. Then he was feverishly hunting for Reddy in the Everglades, and after finding him, was starting off for the field trials, with goodbyes from Mrs. Marshall, Bob, and Patricia ringing in his ears. Then Reddy was ill, and he was saying goodbye again and leaving for Alberta. And once more he was saying goodbye, this time to Reddy, as he went down the mountain path to find the king. And the king himself appeared, near a river among the mountains, and ran to Reddy, the two meeting joyfully and loping off together into the forest. It all seemed real, even when Johnny waked up, and looking around, he realized he was in his little house, beside the stove which had gone out, leaving the room very chilly. He started to get up, but his foot touched against something on the floor. It moved just a little in the dim light, and Johnny leaned suddenly forward, not understanding whether he was still in a dream, for beside him with his head on his paws lay Reddy. Johnny stooped and ran his hand across the powerful shoulders and over the fine head, his fingers fumbling. And then Reddy rose to his feet and laid his muzzle on his master's knee, his eyes seeking Johnny's, and looking into them long and solemnly while Johnny stroked his ears and talked to him. When the chill in the room again caught Johnny's attention, he saw that the door was ajar. He guessed that the latch was not caught and that Reddy had just pushed it open. While he was closing it, the big hound lay down again, with a finality that had something almost pathetic about it. Reddy had come home from his wanderings to stay. Johnny stood quite still looking at him, and with an odd catch in his throat. "I think I know how you feel, old chap," he thought. "You're like me. Through now with your work in the mountains. For your greatest friend, your first loyalty, the king, is dead." The End of Wilderness Champion by Joseph Wharton Lippincott.